Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis admitted to a relationship with a prosecutor on the team leading the Georgia election interference indictment into Donald Trump. Atlanta News First Carly Barnett shares more about why Willis says she should not be disqualified.
Facing a court-ordered deadline, District Attorney Fani Willis responded Friday to allegations of an improper relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. She'd hired him to assist in the investigation into former President Donald Trump and others. Willis admitted to the romantic relationship in a 176-page filing, but said it started after Wade's hiring in November 2021, saying any personal relationship among members of the prosecution team does not amount to a disqualifying conflict of interest. Further, Willis says she did not benefit financially from Wade's hiring. He was paid almost $600,000 since 2021. Wade and Willis took vacations together, as shown in Wade's financial documents, but Willis said the two never shared a bank account or home, and they split expenses, quote, relatively evenly. She also argues the defendant's legal teams have some couples of their own, so if those relationships are not conflicts of interest, then hers isn't either. The relationship allegations were made public in January in a motion to disqualify Willis filed by Michael Roman, a defendant in the Fulton County election indictment, and his attorney, Ashley Merchant. Merchant alleging Wade wasn't qualified to prosecute the case. But in Willis's response, she took aim at Merchant specifically, showing pictures of her at an event supporting Wade for a 2016 judgeship position, even wearing a shirt with his name on it.
It's clear that Fani Willis has come out strongly stating that the allegations are not disqualifying in any way.
Last week, former President Trump had joined the motion to disqualify Willis. Steve Sadow, Trump's lead defense counsel in Georgia, issued a statement in light of Willis's response, saying, quote, the Fulton County DA's response asks the court to turn a blind eye to her alleged personal and financial misconduct. Her sole objective is to try to stop the court from holding the evidentiary hearing that is set for February 15th.
And that was Carly Barnett reporting. Right now, the hearing is still set for February 15th. And in Washington, D.C., House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan subpoenaed Willis yesterday for financial documents. Willis says allegations that she misused federal money are baseless.